Good morning. I hope you guys are doing well this morning. I have some good news for you. And the test that you guys took the last class is the last test that you're going to take for me for the year. So, since Governor Murphy has kept us home from school for the remainder of the year, I looked through how many classes we have and the different concepts that I need to teach you. And I noticed that there just aren't enough days if I were to throw tests in there. I know you're really upset about that one. So we're just going to be working on different topics as we go through. And basically, your grade is making sure you do your work. Hint, hint. Um, and you need to do relatively well, too. I mean, like, if you get one or two wrong, that's not the end of the world. If you get all of them wrong, I can't give you full credit for that. That's not an A plus. So do your best. Reach out to me when you have when you need any help. So we're going to jump into chapter 8 right now. We're going to do most of the lessons. I'm going to take out one or two here or there, just depending on, I just want to make sure that we cover the most important things before you guys go to high school. It's kind of cool to say, isn't it? So we're going to work on exponents now. We started working on exponents when you guys were in 5th grade. But before that, we're going to go back to 3rd grade for a second. Okay. In 3rd grade, you learned something called repeated addition. So add up all those fives. Well, you realize that there was a much faster way to add up those fives, and that was something called multiplication. So that was whatever that 9 times 5 is 45. And then after that, you did something called repeated subtraction. Now, your teacher might not have done repeated subtraction this way. You did it as groups, but if you think about it, if you have 45 and you're breaking them up into groups of 5, you're really subtracting 5 out each time. And that's what's called division. So now we've done repeated subtraction, repeated addition. Well, now we're going to do repeated multiplication. And if you remember back from 5th grade, this is what exponents are. Okay. So for example, this one I have 2 being multiplied together 12 times. Does that ever happen in real life? Actually, it does. Okay. Your computers are actually set up using powers of 2. It's called the binary system. And if you ever notice on like thumb drives or whatever, it's always going to be a power of 2. Now most of them are 32 gigabytes. The next one's 64 gigabytes. After that's 128, and then 256, and then 512, and then it goes up to a terabyte. I don't know if thumb drives or flash drives go up that high yet, but hard drives will. So it follows that same pattern. Okay. So let's look at the different parts of the exponent. So this is referred to as a power. There's different parts of it. 3 is what's called the base. 5 is what's called the exponent. Now, if I were to read this, I would say 3 to the 5th or 3 to the 5th power. That's also allowed. Ooh, let me move myself out of the way here. So again, this is just what it looks like. So this is the base. That is the exponent. Sometimes it's also referred to as the power. Depends on what you're looking at. So if you look at this problem right here, we have 1/2, and then there's parentheses around it, and that's to the 5th power. So what happens is sometimes we'll look at this as we're going through today. You need to have a parenthesis so you know what's being raised to the exponent. If I didn't have these parentheses here, you think that just the 1 is being raised to the power. A little bit different. You'll see why when we get a little bit further. So what does this mean? It means I have 1/2 and I'm multiplying it by itself 5 times. Okay. And then you just, multiply that through. Now, this is not that complicated, but there's ways to use your calculator to help you out with that. So write each using the power using exponents. What that means is you're just taking this, you're not solving it, you're just writing it in a different way. Okay. So we want to write it in exponent as an exponent. So we have 3 times 3 times 3. So we have 6 3s. So this is going to be written as 3 to the 6th power, just like that. And when you're writing exponents, it's always written to the upper right, and it's a little bit smaller. Okay, so here, your base is not just 7, it's -7. So it's -7 times -7 times -7. So we were at our base first, which is -7. Then our exponent is the number of times we are using it. Now, it does not always have to be numbers. We can have constants, which are what pi is. You can have variables, not that big of a deal. So we have 2 pi's being multiplied by each other. So that's pi. Now, if it's to the 2nd power, you guys know it's called squared. So it's pi squared, and then r multiplied by itself 3 times, so it's r cubed. So you just write it like that. Each factor with its own exponent. Okay. Let me just move myself out of the way. So we have 4 times 4 times 4 times 5 times 4. So 4 is the base, and the exponent's going to be 5, because that's how many times I'm multiplying it together. And then g is the base here, and I have the exponent's going to be 4. So that will be 4 to the 5th, g to the 4th. Okay. Now, sometimes you're going to come across where it says evaluate. Now, evaluate means you simplify it as far as you can go. So, for example, if there's numbers, you can simplify that. If it's variables, obviously you can't. If it's a constant like pi, you just leave it as pi. You don't really have to worry too much about it. So 5 cubed, there's actually a real value for this. So 5 cubed is 5 times 5 times 5. So what you'll do is just multiply those together and you get 125. Okay. Now, sometimes you have ones that are a little bit higher. Okay. You can use a calculator to help you. Depending on what calculator you have, depends on which one you use. So if you're just using a 4-function calculator, this doesn't really work as well. But this is just using the calculator on Google. Let's say I wanted to do 5 to the 3rd. So I'd click on 5, and then you have all these buttons over here. The one we want is right here. Do you notice on the X has a little exponent up here that says Y? And that just means I can choose any value for my base and then any value for my exponent. So let's say it was 5 to the 3rd. Oh, it looks just like I had on the screen. Put it in, 125. It gets a little complicated on here if you're doing it with a fraction. So let's say it was like 2/3 to something. Then you'd have to do the numerator by itself and the denominator by itself. But you still can do that. It's not that complicated to do. So go through here. Now, the next one you have to be very careful of is dealing with negative signs. Negative signs can be very tricky, and here's why. If you look at this and this, they look very, very similar. They are not the same. Okay? And the key with exponents, and this is probably the most important thing to take away from today. Whatever the exponent is touching, that is what is being raised to the power. Okay, so if you look here, the 4 is not touching the 2. The 4 is not touching the negative sign. The 4 is touching the parentheses. Since it's touching the parentheses, what's in the parentheses is your base. It can be more than one thing. It does not have to be just one number. It doesn't have to be a positive number. Okay, whatever's in the parentheses, that's what's being raised to the 4th power. So this would be -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. So -2 times -2 is 4. Those two multiply to 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Now that is very different than -2 to the 4th. Here, the exponent of 4 is touching the 2. The base here is 2. It is not -2. If the base was -2, we would put it in parentheses. Okay, so that's one of those little things. Remember we talk about in math, there are certain things that are just understood and they're done, so that way we don't have to write all this crazy stuff. So like anytime an exponent is 1, we don't ever write it. Anytime a coefficient is 1, we don't write the 1. All right, because otherwise it would just make things too crazy and chaotic. So when we deal with exponents, okay, if you want to raise a negative to the power, it needs to be in parentheses. If it's not, this is really considered -1 times 2 to the 4th. So again, the base is 2, the exponent is 4, so I'm repeatedly multiplying 2 here, and then that whole thing I'm multiplying by -1. So the answer would be -16. So this equals 16. This equals -16. So you just have to be very careful with what is the base and then what are you doing to it. So the negatives, you just got to be very careful. Okay, now let's look at this one. -1/6 to the 3rd power. So because the -1/6 is in the parentheses and my exponent is on the parentheses here, everything in the parentheses is being raised to the 3rd power. So this is -1/6 times -1/6 times -1/6. So now we're just going to do each one individually. So negative times negative is positive. Positive times negative is negative. Here's what thing's kind of cool about exponents. Anytime it's an even exponent, if there's a negative in here, it doesn't matter because negative times negative is always positive. But if this is an odd exponent and you have a negative that you're raising to a power, it's always going to be negative. So 1 times 1 times 1 is negative 1. So now we do the denominator, 6 times 6 times 6. Okay, we'll go back to our calculator. Okay, so this is 6 to the third power, so I type in 6. I hit my little exponent button down here, hit the 3, and that comes out to be 216. And you can see it's already there. There we go. So it's negative 1 216th. That leads us to the order of operations. You did this in 6th grade. You started it in 5th grade. Then in 6th grade, you started to add exponents. In 7th grade, you started to add negatives in there. So now we're just going to go back and do a little bit more with exponents. So if you remember in the order of operations, the way things are done is the very first thing you do is what's in parentheses. After you've done what's in parentheses, you then do any exponents that are there. Once you have any exponents that have been completed, then you do multiplication and division together left to right. So that means if multiplication happens first, you do that, or if division happens first, you do that. Finally, you do addition and subtraction together left to right. So if subtraction happens first, you do that. If addition happens before subtraction, you do that. So you always do it in that order. I'll put myself right there. So we can do this one. So we have 3 plus 2 times 3 to the 4th. So there are no parentheses, so we automatically go down to exponent. So we have 3 to the 4th. Okay, now as we're doing this, we go down 1 at a time. Okay, if you don't use it at that moment, you rewrite it. So I didn't use the 3, I didn't use the 2. All I did was make 3 to the 4th, 81. Okay. Then the next thing is multiplication, because I have addition and multiplication. Multiplication always gets done first. So 2 times 81 is 162. Finally, I do my addition. I get 165. The next one is this one, negative 3 times, parentheses, negative 10 squared plus 70. Okay. Now, first thing I do is in parentheses. So now in parentheses, I use the order of operations as well. So the first thing I'll do in parentheses is the exponent. So this is negative of 10 squared. Not negative 10 squared, the negative of 10 squared. So 10 squared is 100. Okay, and it's a negative of that. I didn't use the 70. I didn't use the negative 3 yet. They just get rewritten. So now I do what's in parentheses next. So negative 100 plus 70 is negative 30. These get multiplied together. So negative 3 times negative 30 is 90. Okay, last one is 3 cubed minus 8 squared divided by 2. So 3 squared. So we're going to do parentheses first. There's no parentheses. So now we do exponents. 3 cubed is 27. 8 squared is 64. Okay, so 3 squared, so 27 minus 64 divided by 2. Next thing we do is multiplication and division. So I have a division here. So I use what's right before it and what's right after it. So 64 divided by 2 is 32. So this is 27 minus 32 is negative 5. If you, just for your calculation, if you guys are using an iPhone, what works with the iPhone is you have to turn it sideways. Now, I don't know how well you can see this. It's not super duper great. So you have your numbers over here. But then when you come over to the right on the second line, okay, it's going to have a couple of words. So if you get your phone out, this will help you. It's going to say second, then it's going to say x squared. So if you're just raising it to the second power, use that one. The next one says x cubed. So if you're raising a number to the third power, you use that one. And then the next one says xy. Okay, x to the y power. So you can use your phone to calculate that. Let's say it was 3 cubed. Now it only works if it's horizontal. It doesn't work if it's vertical. Okay. If I type in 3, actually let's do 3 to the 7th. So I type in 3, okay? And those are not the easiest thing. Now I'm going to hit that little button. x to the y, and it goes gray. And then you hit the other number that you want, which is a 7. Okay. Then you hit equal sign, and it gives you your answer. So again, this is a phone will help you, or you can just use calculator in Google. All right, please reach out to me if you have any questions. Good luck. Bye.